So, the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law. So, what are the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law? These are not mere abstract concepts but are of valuable practical application to various situations in the field. It is the distinction, proportionality, limitation, and the Martens Clause. So, what is the principle of distinction? Most basic principle of IHL, or the International Humanitarian Law, which is for parties to the conflict to distinguish between combatants and the civilians. So, who are the combatants? They are the opponents of the government or by the military under the government, and the civilians who doesn't know anything about the war between combatants and the military, and between military objectives and civilian objects. And second, indiscriminate attacks are those which A. are not directed at a specific military objective, B. employ a method or means of combat which cannot be directed at a specific military objective, and C. employ a method or means of combat the effects of which cannot be limited as required by the rules of war. So here in A, it is said that it is not directed at a specific military objective. So, meaning to say, any strong attacks is not an objective of a military objective, because they just want peace for the people or the civilians, or means of combat which cannot be directed at a specific military objective. And letter B, employ a method of means of combat which cannot be directed at a specific military objective. So, the military objectives are not for creating a war but to protect the people or the civilians. And C, employ a method or means of combat the effects of which cannot be limited as required by the rules of war. So, the military, they create methods or means of combat the effects. So, they create objectives without giving bad effects to the civilians. It is just for their protection. And consequently, the following are prohibited. Acts or threats of violence, the primary purpose of which is to spread terror among the civilian population of terrorism. First is attacks by bombardment, which treats as a single military objective a number of clearly separated and distinct military objectives in a city, town, village, or other area containing a concentration of civilians or civilian objects. So, terrorism wants to make attacks by bombardment or putting bombs or throwing bombs that threats the military objective. And they put those attacks or make attacks on the concentration of civilians where there are a lot of people that can be affected of it. And then indiscriminate attacks are prohibited. So, strong attacks or indiscriminate attacks are prohibited. And so are the use of weapons which are by nature indiscriminate. But But for the terrorist, or for the purpose of terrorism by the combatants, for the terrorists, they create attacks or strong attacks or the indiscriminate attacks. This is the main principle of for civilian protection made by the military or made by the military objective, the militaries.
What is proportionality? So here, the principle of proportionality is the proper balancing of conflicting interests between military necessities and humanitarian consideration. Among several military objectives for obtaining a similar military advantage, the objective selected should the one where the attack may be expected to cause the least danger to civilian and civilian object. So, what is proportionality means? So, the proportionality is the idea that the action should not be more severe than is necessary. So just like for example, if you committed a crime, then you should be punished based on the crime that you did. So it means that proportionality is the way to balance the conflict between military necessities and the humanitarian consideration. The next one is the principle of proportionality is also reflected into two concepts. The first one is the prohibition of causing superfluous injury or unnecessary suffering, especially as applied to means and methods of warfare. So what does superfluous means? Superfluous or SLRUS means it refers to the effect of certain methods or means of warfare which usually aggravated the suffering of disabled man. So the next principle is the weighing of not only humanitarian but also socio-economic and natural and environmental consequences vis-a-vis military utilities, much like the weighing of costs and benefits or the ends and means. So it means that that proportionality is weighing the humanitarian, but not only the humanitarian but also the socio-economic and natural environmental consequences on military utility. Next one is what is the principle of limitation? So limitation, what does it mean? Limitation is the way to balance the principle of humanity and military necessity. So it means that all things has a limitation. Next is what is the Demartins clause, fallback principle. So the Demartins clause means in the absence of a specific rule, the Martin clause gives protection and the rule of the principle. Like for example, so person affected by armed conflicts will never find themselves unprotected. So no one will be feel unprotected and the Martin's clause. Thank you.
Who are the civilians and who are the combatants? Civilians are persons who are not members of armed forces of the party to an army conflict, and they protect against attack unless and for such times as they take directly part in army hostilities. Combatants are all members of such army forces, usually in international army conflict except medical and religious personnel. Such army forces, considering all organization army forces group units with the under commands responsible to a party to the conflict for the conduct of its surveillance. They are including engineering battalions composed of engineering who are full-time informed member of AFE. Civilians they are the personnel who are not supposed to be in the middle of the war or conflict. When conflict comes in the instant, they are not the one who suffer of the danger because they are not prepared in the dangerous situation. That's sometimes the duty of the combatants is to protect them and put them it in a safety. Combatants, they are a personnel who are fight against attack, and they are purpose is it's to harm enemy army forces and the opportunities equipment. The duty is not the only win not the only win to the war, but also protect the civilians acting as the guards and or patrolling the duties in the area.
In the Philippine context, who are among not legitimate military targets? In the Philippine context, not legitimate military targets are PNP personnel without combat duties, including killing them solely to obtain weapons. Number 2. Members of self-defense or vigilante groups while not directly participating in hostilities. And number 3, civilian official like barangay captains not directly participating in hostilities, person with political rules, such as abusive mayors are not proper target. Number 4, person refusing to pay revolutionary tax as well as their business. Number 5, dissident part-time militia while not directly participating in hostilities. Because the PNP personnel without combat duties his job is to support his police and order for the enemy to get their weapon, they have to kill the PNP personnel. And the members of the self-defense or vigilante groups, on the other hand, are just waiting until there is no order to participate in the fight. And civilian official like barangay captain, not directly participating in hostilities, person with political rules such as abusive mayors are not proper target. And the next is what are civilian objects and what are military objectives. Civilian objects are all objects that are not military objectives and are protective against attack unless and for such as time they are military objectives. Some example of civilian objects are house, school, church, farm, commercial building, industrial plant, power transmission tower, cell site, public transport, other civilian infrastructure, and also cultural property. And military objectives are limited to those objects which by their nature, location, purpose, or use make for an effective contribution to military action and whose destruction, capture, or neutralization under the circumstance offers a definite military advantage. There is a two-fold test to constitute a military objective. Some example of military objectives are weapon, war material, military works and establishments, supplies, vehicle, campsite, fortification, and fuel. Depot or store used by any party to the conflict. Also object that, while not directly connected with combat operation, effectively contribute to the military effort, such as transportation and communication system and facilities, airfield, sport, and otherwise non-military industry of importance, the ability of a party to the conflict to conduct military operation.
Essential judicial guarantees that no one may be accused, convicted, or sentenced, other known as exemption trial. They are exempted pursuant to a fair trial on account of any act of commission which does not constitute a criminal offense under a national international law at the time it was committed, nor for the heavier penalty be imposed that which was applicable at the time the criminal offense was committed, and other except on the basis of individual crime responsibility. This is required, that is a extra fair trial. Otherwise, what obtains would be what is called kangaroo court. Kangaroo court is due to process applied, like a mahabang proseso. Not required of the due process applies. on spies, informer, infiltrators, or a deep penetration agent who will be not convicted or a sentence without a previous trial. Thereby, a following must be also respected. One is a personal convicted or mga beliefs, religious practices, like mga paniniwala. Family lives as a past responsible or possible. Mga pamilyang posibilidad.
Is a person horse the combat. Horse the combat international humanitarian law that refers to a person who are incapable of performing their ability to a combat. Example, sick, wounded fighter pilots or air crews or disabled. The horse is a person out of combat or anyone who is in the power of enemy. Number two is defenseless because of unconsciousness, shipwreck, wounds, or sickness. This clearly indicates an intention to surrender and does not attempt to escape. What are the fundamental guarantees for the treatment or civilian person or the combat? They must be treated humanely. The following are all prohibited. And number one, any form adverse discrimination, murder, torture, cruel and inhuman treatment, and outrage upon personal dignity, in particularly humiliating and degrading treatment, corporal punishment, mutilation, medical or scientific experiment, or any other medical procedure not indicated by the state of health of the person concerned and not consistent with generally accepted medical standards.
Writ of Amparo. The writ of Amparo is a Mexican origin. Amparo means protection from the Spanish word amparar. It is the remedy available to any person whose right to life, liberty, and security has been violated or is threatened with the violation by an unlawful act or omission of a public official or employee, or a private individual or entity. The writ is issued in cases of extrajudicial killing, enforces disappearance or threat thereof. On September 25, 2007, the Supreme Court approved the writ of amparo. In the event that the writ of amparo is issued against any member of the AFP by the Supreme Court, Court of Appeals, Sandigang Bayan, or any justice of such court and the regional trial court, the following rules of action shall be strictly followed by the unit concerned and provided by AFP policy, directive of action, and defense. These are the rules of writ of amparo dated December 17, 2007. The first rule is to identify and verify the aggrieved party. The second rule is to recover and preserve evidence related to the death or disappearance of a person identified in the petition or those right to life, liberty, and security is threatened with the violation of an unlawful act or omission as allegedly in the petition that may aid the prosecution of the persons responsible. The third is to identify the witnesses and obtain statement from them concerning the death or disappearance. Number 4, to determine the causes, manner, location, and the time of death or disappearance, as well as many patterns and practices that may have brought about the death or disappearance. The fifth is to identify and apprehend the persons involved in the death or disappearance. The last is to bring the suspected offender before a competent court. Amparo, generally granted by a Supreme Court or Constitutional Court, serve a dual protection purpose. It protects the citizen and his basic guaranteed protection, the Constitution itself, by ensuring that these principles are not violated by statutes or action of the state undermine the basic right enshrined therein. King Paul Palo, sir.
The right to access data. The right to access data is a remedy already to any person to right privacy in life. Liberty and security is violated by threatened by the unlawful or omission of public official or private individual. The right of access data is enabled to partition or invoke the right to privacy to right to information. In Latin America, the right of has been used to enable to patricianer or obtain information about himself from public or private records. This enforces this disappearance of the family's victim of the cold demand close information. In case where data about the petitioner has been used to write habeas data to correct the data from this the right of access data remedy to any person who restrict this privacy in life. In Latin America, the right has used to enable to petitioner to obtain information. This can be also case in the killings, the right of used to invoke the right of privacy.
When the right of habeas data is served, the respondent shall observe the following. The respondent shall be verified read and return together with the supporting affidavits within 5 days works of the service of the writ, which period will be reasonably extended by the court for justifiable reasons. Example, I received a subpoena yesterday, then today I will file an appeal to the court that defend myself for being accused, and together with the appeal is I also submitted my supporting affidavits. Number 2, to return shall be among other things contain the following: the secret of privilege, the communication confidentiality of the source of information of the media. Example, the lawyer should not disclose any information for his client, and any information that you know to your client you should not share into the others. In case of respondent in charge the positions of the control of the data or the information subjected for the petition. Example, as a respondent, I should tell the truth with an accuracy and basis, not denying or making a story contradict to the real story. And a disclosure of the data information about petitioner, the nature of such data or information, and purpose of its collections. Example, a person who is responsible of sharing confidentiality will be liable for the Data Privacy Act. And then, the step of action taken by the respondent to ensure the security and confidentiality of the data information. The respondent should sign an oath to, to justify that she is saying the truth, the accuracy of the data and the information held, and other allegations relevant to the resolution of the proceeding, the role of the writ of habeas data are the writ is also used to invoke the right of the privacy. The rate enables to the person know and the rate which the data about himself is being collected. That's all. Thank you.